After asking what time it is, my clock has stopped. Okay, great. Well, that would be a sure way to have a long discussion. Time for a quick shave.
I think we're live.
David, I think we're live.
You are good to go.
Mark, thank you very much. Welcome everyone to our second poet-composer discussion of the 2021 Source Song Festival, taking place nominally from Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, but actually taking place from all over the country, with composers and performers having virtually performed for us and having written music for us. My name is David Evan Thomas, and I'm the composer mentor for Source. I'm your moderator and MC this evening. I'd like to welcome especially our poet laureate and poet-in-residence Joyce Sutphen, from whose book, Carrying Water to the Field, New and Selected Poems, the composers have all chosen their texts for their songs. And I'd like to welcome the composers, Ben Morris, Lingbo Ma, Tamika Howard, and Ryan Homsey. Welcome finally to our viewers on YouTube and Facebook. If you have a question, we'd be happy to entertain it. Please put it in the chat and we'll try to toss it into play in this virtual tennis court of not quite doubles. I guess we're a little more than doubles, but the balls will be bouncing back and forth quite a bit, I think. So thank you all for joining us. And first of all, I just have to congratulate all of the composers on beautiful pieces that are expressive, daring, virtuosic. And I want to congratulate the performers. These performances were, I think, practically definitive. And the composers, I'm sure, feel very lucky to have heard them. And of course, I want to thank Joyce Sutphen for providing poems that are meditative, very thoughtful, beautifully crafted in language that just invites music. To all of you, thank you so much. I think I'd like to start with a question. For all of you, I will give you a chance to answer, but maybe we'll go in order of performance tonight. So we'll begin with Ben. Joyce asked in her talk with Anna George Meek that she'd like to know what drew you to the poem that you chose.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's a good question. So the poem I chose is Death Inc., and you've all heard the song. The thing that stood out to me about this particular poem is, first and foremost, I think the sense of humor that kind of underlies it. A lot of these poems, you know, they deal with kind of very heavy subjects, which is interesting to me, but I also like to kind of portray some fun and kind of deliver those messages in a fun way. And I think that this poem, Death Inc., was a good example of that. So in the poem, the death is sort of personified in these different ways. He's personified as a man sitting at the bus stop reading a folded newspaper. He's personified ultimately as a meth addict driving an 18-wheeler, and then also in kind of more pastoral images. So the traditional image of death kind of driving by the schoolyard and being drawn by horse and carriage, and then also like the tree falling, the shadow of a tree falling on the yard. So there's a lot of diversity in images. So I thought that my musical style, I come from a jazz background and I love kind of jazz piano colors. And I thought that this poem would be a good opportunity to kind of deliver this sort of fun quasi cabaret style song, kind of in the vein of William Bolcom. If you've all heard his cabaret songs before, that's kind of the reference. And also the kind of stride piano colors of like Earl Hines or Errol Garner or James P. Johnson, or Art Tatum, people like that. So I thought that this poem could really be a good vehicle for that. And so it was really fun to work with Sarah and Reagan to bring this to life. And I think their love of musical theater and this kind of humorous art song really channeled, and it kind of working together was really fun for that.
Mm-hmm. Now, this the medium itself is no stranger to you. I mean, I know you've written opera before, but was this something new for you to bring into art song?
Yeah, it was. I guess I like to think of all art song. Every project that I do is extremely different because the poems are so different. But in this particular instance, yeah, this kind of quasi cabaret vibe in an art song is something I haven't done before. So it was exciting.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to ask Joyce, did Ben approach the humor in the poem in a way that felt congruent with what you had intended?
Definitely, but I don't think that I think I was more sort of below the surface, and I'm not sure. I should have turned the video off and listened without seeing anything. Of course, then if I had done that, I would have missed that great ending. That was a surprise, wasn't it? And so kind of sly and cool the way he did that. But my question was completely answered in Ben's comments, because I wondered if something in the poem invited that treatment, and you already were eloquent on that subject. So yeah, I think that I probably didn't realize the potential of the various kind of personifications, but I think Ben read them very well. So.
One of the things that always happens in a first performance is that the composer is presented with a lot of information suddenly from performers. So I'm wondering, Ben, if there was anything in the process of having the poem or having the song performed that you learned that was surprising to you.
Yeah, and I guess I can thank Source for being such a good collaborative process and allowing us to kind of workshop these. And I definitely took advantage of that with Sarah and Reagan. A lot of my piano writing tends to be very dense. There's like a lot of stuff going on in the piano. And so having it workshopped with Reagan and Sarah allowed me to make these decisions to maybe pull back on the piano at certain parts, to allow the voice to kind of come through. So those practical elements, and also just the interpretation. Like sometimes I felt that, maybe it wasn't exactly what I wanted, like the tone of it. So I had to make some tweakings in terms of the pacing and everything. So all those little details, it gets Source enabled us to do those changes. So that was fun.
So you actually made musical changes to the content of the music as it was being workshopped?
Yeah, definitely. Having heard the voice, because the voice is such a specific sound, and especially Sarah's voice is kind of, so I knew of her voice, but I didn't know specifically how it would sound on this piece. So hearing that and reacting to it was important, I think.
Mm-hmm. Very good. I think what we'll do is maybe have a chance to meet, to talk with each of the composers individually, and then perhaps toward the end we'll talk about some more general questions where everybody can kind of join in. But I do want everybody to have a chance to introduce themselves. Lingbo Ma, what drew you to your poem?
So this poem, Rodin on Film, drew my attention after my first reading through it. It's a quite unusual poem. I feel like I can see this image of Rodin working alone in his studio with a weak lighting. And from the talk that we just watched, I learned that it's called an ekphrastic poem. I guess that kind of vividly dramatic verbal description of Rodin working is what makes this poem so special to me.
Did you think of yourself as a sculptor as you were working?
Say that again.
Did you think of yourself as a sculptor as you were writing the poem?
No, I was thinking myself as someone watching this scene, watching Rodin and watching this film being made. So I'm watching the whole thing.
You were sort of the stage director of
something like that.
Joyce, maybe as a way to talk about that, one of the ways we can think about working with music is that music is a kind of sculpture in time. We're sculpting time as opposed to sculpting physical matter. Did you find that the poem Rodin on Film was sculpted in a way that felt familiar, or something that was in your mind?
Oh, well, I loved what Lingbo did with the poem very much. I think that there was like a drama throughout. It progressed from the kind of moment that the film starts out with, as I remember it, because it's been about 10 years since I stood in that museum and watched the film and thought the things I thought. But there's the way the music follows the down, 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 and really kind of surprisingly echoes it in a really nice way. And then I don't have the poem in front of me right here, and as you know, I don't memorize my own poems. I save that brain space for other things. But it continues with Rodin. I was thinking about. I will find it. This is silly. In any case, the thing I was getting to was the part where Rodin is working with the chisel and the pieces are flaking away and his eye is flickering, and the music becomes really like mechanic, or like not like a factory, but very boom, 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 just kind of coming along. And then there's this moment when I don't know, Lingbo, how you did this, but he does these things for the camera, and he realizes that he's going to become flat, dead air and pretend that it is life. I mean, that illusion of and you had the singer singing a flat, dead sound perfectly, I thought. And then when he said, let it pretend that it is heavy with life, the word actually just filled like a balloon or something. And so I was just aware that you were taking my words about a film that was filmed from reality but was no longer reality, and that we had all these layers of different arts happening at once. It's amazing, I think. Anyway, I just thought you did a wonderful job working through the poem and dividing it in a narrative way. So I've gone on too long, but I'm...
Well, I think, Lingbo, would you please respond to some of that? Was that intentional for you?
Well, I just want to say the poem is self-revelatory to me. It's very musical. So there's one spot that I want to mention is in the second stanza, the several repeats of the words. He's thinking of flesh turning to stone, stone turning to bone, and the alliteration that follows this line, in moment, movement, marble, and motion, the musical ideas as soon as I read them. When I finished the piece, this section actually came out first, and in a very natural way. I used a sequence figure there to change the silent and immobile vibes before that and to push the music forward. And from watching Joyce's talk just now, I was surprised to see that, well, you acknowledge that this passage has indeed been visceral for you. I feel like it's very magical because I never had a talk with you. When I was setting it, it turned out that this poem has just been very revelatory.
Thank you very much. Yes, isn't that interesting? It's like when we write a poem or when we write a song, we are standing on one edge of the field and the poet is at the other end of the field. And we then walk toward each other, and maybe if we're lucky, we meet in the middle and greet each other. In some cases, maybe we'll walk past each other, and that might work out fine too. But it's a different kind of experience. So in this case, it seemed like you met in a third space somewhere. Tamika, you brought a wonderful warm lyricism to the program, and you also performed as well as being a composer, which was a marvelous surprise, a beautiful playing. Tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit about what for you the function of the obligato flute is in your song.
Well, I think it might be a product of some past collaborations that I had done at Brunel University, where I've been asked to play some pieces that featured the flute with the voice, and I love to play as well. But it's something about the flute seems to extend the feelings and the emotions of the speaker to me.
Extend the feelings and emotions of the speaker. So it's like another presence in the song, as well as the singer and the piano.
Or maybe another embodiment beyond the melody itself. Yes, just another embodiment that fits into the whole.
Yes, and since the poem is this very intimate, I mean, it's not a conversation, but it's a conversation imagined by the speaker, the flute seemed to bring an embodiment to it, just as you said. What was it that drew you to this poem? Go ahead.
Maybe it's, I'm sorry, maybe it's kind of like the feelings in the room, you know, the emotions kind of have their own life in a way.
Okay, well, we're going to come back to that maybe and ask Joyce about that, but would you tell us how you came to the poem and what drew you to it?
Well, I kind of deliberated going through between several different poems, and I had two criterion in mind. It had to first draw my interest. It's something that I had to first connect to and relate to on some level. And then the other was, did I feel like I could literally sing it? And so I would leaf through poems and extemporize, just sing, just on the moment, kind of improvise melodies to see which one fit. And this one fit once I started really just continuing to look at it in more depth. And then I also related to it. I did not get married until I turned 40. And so I related to it on a personal level. I've been married happily for 7 years. And to me, I don't know, it just seemed to be very tender and very sincere. And I related to the sentiments there. And what I try to do musically is what I try to do with all my compositions. I like blending styles. I like blending R&B and jazz with classical music. And so what you see is the result.
Marvelous. Joyce, please tell us what it was like to hear your sonnet sung and played, and the interaction of the instruments. So how did it all strike you?
It was beautiful. That's the first comment I have to say. And I'll say a little bit more about like how well you fit the now I feel like I'm saying another poem of mine, how well you fit everything into the exact place it was given in a way. I mean, you changed, like sometimes you usually took a whole line and put it in that portion of the melody, whatever length that was. I didn't see the music, but then I thought, how well have I kept my numbers, which is the count of syllables in a sonnet traditionally is iambic pentameter, and it's 10 syllables. And so here's the number of syllables I have in this piece. It's 10, 8, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 8, 10, 9. So I slipped a little, and I think that gave you the chance to put a word with its phrase, and I just thought it was just fit, just perfectly. And but I don't know where you came up with that melody is really catchy and beautiful. I couldn't sing it though. I tried, and I'm not a singer for one thing, but wow, it's kind of goes all over, and it sounds really solid, but it's tricky, I think.
Well, in a way that kind of goes with our genre, doesn't it? I mean, we're not actually writing Tin Pan Alley songs, say, I'll be loving you always. Something that has a kind of casual hook to it. The lines develop in a more subtle way. And you could tell, Tamika, with your setting of the voice, that you had spoken and sung the lines so that the words were, well, as Anna George Meek said in the introduction, the business of mouth feel. It was like we knew that you had the words in your being and in your mouth. Ryan, what drew you to the poem? I remember when we were talking about it before, we were talking about what the mood of the poem is, and would you maybe talk a little bit about how that drew you to it, and what other things drew you?
Yes, thank you. I just love all of Joyce's poetry, so it did take me a considerable amount of time to sort of simmer it down to the one that I would pick for this particular occasion. And I chose Your Name. I'm originally from the Midwest, so it's really drawn to the references of the prairie, the depiction of nature, And that idea, this kind of speaks a little bit to the mood too that you're talking about, David, this poetic mood, and the idea that lovers can speak to each other through nature from beyond the grave. The piece also deals a lot with themes of memory and loss, and those are some themes that I have explored in some of my previous works as well.
Memory and loss. Joyce, did you sense that feeling of openness, the prairie? Of course, you know that from your own experience, and your poems speak of it. But did you sense that in the music as it unfolded?
Definitely, that the line, I hear your name on the prairie. I could see wheat blowing and a big blue sky opening and just kind of panning a big shot right then, because I don't have the name for, was there a key change? Was there some kind of modulation from something? And you did that quite some other times. I mean, in the very short little prelude piano part, it felt as if it went from one place to the next. And but then that prairie move was definitely noticed, I think.
And there's a kind of a continuation to that line, coming from beyond the farthest field, the last line of trees, and you hear the singer kind of gradually ascending into the ether as the piano accompaniment is getting more broad and expansive to the point where the hands are almost spanning the entire length of the piano. And I think that that's the kind of musical continuation of what you're talking about there, Joyce.
Yeah.
Brian, did you think of the piano as a kind of landscape?
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that Joyce had also shared with me is about like seeing colors in the air and the significance of that. So I wanted the piano to capture that sense of time and space and, you know, at times a kind of ethereal atmospheric quality.
One thing I noticed when I looked at the score that I was given that was ostensibly the final version was that it was missing an introduction and that the ending turned out to be different. Now, when I looked at it, since that's what it said, I was all prepared to ask you, well, what's going on with the silence at the beginning of the song? But maybe you just had an introduction you had yet to compose. Is that right?
That's right. And, you know, I shared my progress with Valeria and Felipe and Joyce all along the way. And it was definitely coming in stages. And I'm laughing because when I first shared the piece as I had it at the time with Valeria and Felipe, I had only had the melody. And so when she first started glancing at it, she was like, oh, wow, like, you know, it's all me right now. But, you know, that was sort of the order that I composed them in. And I didn't have the introduction or the conclusion or the, you know, the ending until just a few days prior. And I think, I don't know, every musical decision that I make is inspired by the text. And so the introduction and the ending don't have any text. So it took a little bit longer.
Yes, Joyce.
Anna said that in the interview that your name was one of the most difficult syntactically. And I started doing what I do when I analyze somebody else's poem. I started like asking questions of the text and you know, one of them could be, what is this person's name? You know, and is there like, I mean, you didn't play on this, and I don't know if it should be, but when at the beginning, I forgot to say your name. I say it now, your name. And that's sort of a little bit, you know, I mean, is is the text telling us that that the name was given, or was it just, again, kind of pulled a little bit beyond? I don't know. It's just, it started looking rather difficult to me to interpret, and full of ambiguity. So I hope that doesn't. Well, I think it only makes your interpretation more solid and more yours. You know.
Well,
And-
yes,
and-
sorry. Yeah, I mean, some of the things you're making me think about in your conversation with Anne there is that grammatical positioning, how your name transforms over time and appears in different places. And I wanted to reflect that naturally in the rhythm, in the way the text was set. And also you talked about the silence in Shakespeare and also the element of surprise in the writer and the reader. So, and I was tracking your name throughout time in this poem and the transformations. And what's really interesting is that the surprise is the silence. So we hear, you know, I forgot to say your name. I say your name. I hear your name. Your name is the only thing. I say your name. And then all of a sudden you answer, and there's that element, that little turn that you're kind of talking about earlier. And the answer is silence, which is just so profoundly beautiful and genius and also sad and painful. So I kind of tried to track that throughout time, sculpting it through time, to use David's metaphor there.
That makes me wonder a question maybe for the poet, because you talk about poetry being compression, and music is, if anything, expansion into another sense, expansion in sound, but it's also expansion in time. And as a poet, you suddenly lose control of that time when a composer takes it over. Would you talk a little bit about how that sort of conundrum or paradox appeared to you as you were listening?
Oh, David, that's a difficult question, and I don't know that I felt that I'd lost control, but maybe it's because I don't like to take control of too many things, so I don't worry about it. So I think poetry and music and painting and sculpting all are, are what human beings most effectively use to keep what they love and to preserve things and to hold on to it. I don't know, though, about the progression of time as that's happening. It's kind of all moments at once. So if you're saying that, for instance, in the beginning of Tamika's piece, that word finally, the beginning word is, what is, Tamika, Tamika, tell me what the first word of your song is. Now finally, sorry. Now finally. Oh, you actually, is that off the beat when the first note?
Mm-hmm.
And that is really surprising and wonderful. I love that. So I'm aware of lots of different time things in Ben. There's all kinds of surprising moves that my words are going at this speed and yours are double that or something. So all kinds of times things were happening. I suppose that I really wasn't living them too much.
Oh, well, I have a few general questions for the composers, and I think maybe the way to proceed with these would be stay muted until, and if you want to chime in, maybe raise your hand or unmute or something like that, and feel free to bob in. The first thing I would like to know is, what did you learn about the voice in this project? What did you learn about it could be about the vocal mechanism, it could be about the way the voice brings words into sound, it could be something technical. What did you learn about the voice?
Well, I'm not sure if this was the answer you're looking for, but I was really in my sessions with yourself as well as with Libby. That was a wonderful thing to actually be mentored by other composers, seasoned composers. And in both of those sessions, I was, really encouraged to really pay close attention to the grammar of singing. And that was something that I hadn't contemplated as much as I had this time. And that was great, a great lesson.
I would, echo what Tamika was saying. Those lessons were so valuable with you, David, and with Libby. And I think that your attention to the most minute details, a single syllable, a single rest, a single vowel on a particular note that might fall on the break. So, I think one of the things that I gained was an even more nuanced appreciation of all of those really essential finer points.
That's very nice to hear. I wasn't even hoping that you would say something about our lessons. I was thinking more in terms of in hearing and working with the performers, if there was anything. But thank you so much for saying those things.
Well, and then it shows in the performances, because they get to bring it to life with so much greater ease and confidence. And when I heard Valeria, it just realized everything that I had envisioned, and more.
Amazing, isn't it? I don't think everyone knew that they were coming to us from Colombia, I think, weren't they?
Yep, that's right.
From,
they're both in Colombia.
South America.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's that like every single voice is so different, and you can't really apply a blanket statement across all voices. And especially with Sarah's voice, you write a D at the bottom of the staff, and it's like, it sounds like, whoa, there's a totally different color in that singer and this singer. So I think that speaks to this collaborative process, like working with specific performers, like, we're working with other people, like lean into that, like learn about their voice, learn about what the different colors across their range are, and how you can bring those out and how you can accentuate them or choose not to.
I think that's a very important thing to realize, that every voice is unique. But it also applies to composers. Every compositional voice is unique, and we were treated tonight to 4 very powerful, unique voices, compositional voices.
Yes, and that was some of the first conversations I had with my collaborators. The music that they were drawn to, and the range of the singer, and that it's just such a gratifying process as far as feeling like you're tailoring a song to the person that's delivering it.
I also want to resonate with the idea that every singer has a very different voice, very unique voice. My experience was when I was working with my singer Devon. He told me he's a bass baritone. So when I started to sketch my piece, I set it quite low. I think maybe you remember it, David. And you and Libby both mentioned the range, the vocal range in my piece, in my first draft, because I was thinking the piece for a bass baritone, so I set it quite low, and then after I changed the range slightly and Devon sang it, I was surprised to see that he has a beautiful high E and F as well. So yeah, it's you have to adapt your music or tailor your music to different singers. And also another thing is when the singer sings the music out, it's different because breaths are involved. It's so important to have breaths in music, and we can't hear that when we are only reading the music. It has to be sung.
Yes, I want to ask Joyce if she'll chime in on that about the breath in music or the breath in poems.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that whenever you read a poem or sing a song, you're sort of making it continue in its immortality, because breath is filling the poem right then, or the song, and so there's that little thing. But I was, there are breaths between words if there's punctuation, and I use punctuation pretty carefully, and so it would be a different setting. W.S. Merwin poem, for example, where there's no punctuation at all. And I don't know how much the composers used my punctuation. That might be something I would ask them. And what if sometimes they disagreed with it, and if there was one place where they had a war with a semicolon or something, which some poets say shouldn't even appear in a poem, but we'll let go of that for now.
Oh, composers weigh in on that. Punctuation. How did you deal with Joyce's punctuation, and did you react to it? Did you incorporate it?
One of the things that Joyce and Anne were talking about during the opening with your name is the number of like dashes in it, and also like the enjambments where one stanza will sort of continue and fold over into the next. So when I first saw that, I did think that there was going to need to be a kind of creative solution to that, because I don't want the music to run on and on and on and on. And yet, when I heard Joyce read the poem, everything about the placement of things sounded so natural that I just said, let it try to be that natural, and don't try to impose a form on this text that has its own form.
Yes, the punctuation is very exact, very precise, laser precision. And so, yeah, there was that negotiating. That negotiation, the back and forth between me and the poem. I hope we met somewhere in the middle. But I really ended up on one of those stanzas where it says, we can make a life together under. And
Yeah,
I think I fought that a little bit, but then I gave into it. And I think it made the phrasing so much better. So yes, great punctuation and everything. Great.
I think that I know the part you're talking about, and which seemed to have changed since yesterday and every day. And I really loved that since yesterday and every day, the way that you followed that and used it.
I'm just thinking of periods in particular, like specifically periods, and if they line up with cadences. And I'm looking over the poem now, and they don't. I mean, sometimes they do, but other times I just kind of bulldoze over them. So I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think as I figure out the pacing, sometimes those periods really stand out. It's like a big period in the poem. And other times they're just like, oh, it's just moving on to the next sentence. So it's interesting. Yeah.
In another era, another style of composition, those periods might have become perfect cadences where the music really did come to rest, and then it would begin again with a new sentence. We don't do that as much anymore. I think all of you thought about it. I could tell that you were thinking about it, but we have more freedom than composers used to feel, I think. We do have a question from the floor, and Joseph asks, it's for Joyce, when you're writing a poem, do you ever aim to create a kind of music with language?
Music with language?
I think what I hear him saying is, do you try to create musical language? That is the language itself musical?
I think so. I hope so. I think sometimes the meaning even comes from sounds that work with each other and suggest other sounds. I could give you examples, but I'll just say that I want there to be a kind of music. Body is the thing you have to have in order to stay on this planet. I don't know, that's kind of a big, it's more about the statement, but I pay attention to every word, the way it sounds next to the word it's following or preceding, and yeah.
I'm thinking of a line, and maybe you can tell me where I'm hearing this from, but the line is, heard music is sweet, unheard music is sweeter.
It sounds Shakespearean to me.
I think it is, yeah. And in a sense, it sort of speaks to what the poet isn't actually making music, but the poet is still making a musical expression in text.
I think it might be Twelfth Night, but I'm not, which is the play that begins with, if music be the food of love, then play on.
Till I am sated, or till I am completely full of it.
Yeah, well, we have a lovesick Duke there, but
right. Tamika, you had a question for Joyce.
Speaking of love, now finally a love song. I imagine scenarios in my head as far as the circumstances in which you wrote the poem. I don't know, was the poetry? You did mention in the interview that you were really intrigued by the Shakespearean sonnets, and you liked the word plays and things like that. Was it more of an experimentation with the form, or was there a relationship preference, may I ask?
Well, I think the answer will be the one you want to hear, Tamika. It's really a sweet song and really long overdue, and so it was a real thing. So
yeah, that's what I imagined, and then it occurred to me when I was writing it naturally, I felt now needed to come on y'all feet, but that makes sense because the word now implies something happened before, right? So I felt like in poetry, some time had transpired that maybe, when other people might have thought that you might have written love poetry at an earlier point. So it feels like that some time has transpired, and that, yeah, that's what I see it now.
And now look at what we've done. We've really opened up those first two words to the poem. Now, finally, they are a interesting juxtaposition, aren't they? Now, finally.
One's there.
Yeah. So anyway, good.
Marvelous.
Good question.
Well, as we move toward the end, there is a question that I want to ask all the composers, and that is, having been through this time with Source Song Festival and having written a song and heard it performed beautifully and gotten to know the poet and gotten to know many poems by this marvelous poet, what's your next song project?
Well, I'm actually working on, oh, sorry. I'm working on a song cycle now for my dissertation, which is kind of a multi-movement intermedia piece where I'm working with a bunch of different librettists and poets. And certainly this experience will inform that, at least the collaborative aspect of it.
Wishing you all the best, Ben, on that.
Thanks.
Let us know when it's all triumphant.
I'm in a season in my life where I'm kind of seeking collaborations, and I've been blessed to be a part of a fellowship recently with the Cleveland Institute of Music, where I'm meeting other musicians, and I did play a person in opera. And we had a discussion about maybe me writing something, them workshopping it. So I'm looking for more collaborations, and that might be my first collaboration on my next one.
Nice.
Great.
An upcoming sort of long-term project for me is a collaboration with my husband on a one-act chamber opera. And so he's translating some German text from Kleist into English, and it's a really fascinating story about another musical figure, Saint Cecilia. And I'm sure I'll take a lot of what I've learned here throughout the Source Festival and rely on that as I embark upon that project.
I would want to set more of Joyce's poems, if you permit. I tried this ekphrastic poem this time, so I'd like to explore some of the other ones.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. We'll meet. We'll talk.
Marvelous. Well, it sounds like the avenues of communication are open in a lot of directions. I do have to say that that word ekphrastic, EKPHRASTIC, is not in my Webster's third dictionary. However, I did not look at the OED. Joyce?
It's a Greek, or I think it's it's usually italicized. So.
Uh-huh. I'll look at the Greek dictionary. Well, this has been a really fascinating and warm-hearted discussion between talented composers and a gifted poet. And I think we are about to wrap up, but I want to thank you all so much for getting together, giving your all to these projects. And I wish you all the very best of luck.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, David and Joyce. And
Yeah,
everybody.
thank you all. You're
Awesome.
beautiful.